What kind of world do you want to live in? Seriously. What kind of world for your kids, your grandkids?
And yeah, what rules should that world run by?
Exactly. That's really the heart of what we're diving into today. We're looking at this really thought-provoking idea,
Hmm.
a comparison someone's drawing between, well, right now, globally, and that incredibly tense time, 1939, right before World War II kicked off.
Yeah, and to, really get our heads around this, we've been looking closely at a TEDx talk
Right.
by Jim Sciutto. His background, years covering international affairs, it gives him this pretty unique viewpoint, I think.
Definitely. And his analysis throws up some, well, some striking parallels with the past.
It really does.
So our mission, if you like, for this deep dive is to really unpack his main argument,
Uh-huh.
to try and figure out why he sees these echoes of history now and, what it all means for the future world you were going to be living in.
Right. We want to kind of boil down the key insights from what he shared.
Yeah, distill the crucial bits for you.
And it's important, I think, to remember that Sciutto, he isn't just theorizing from an office somewhere.
No, not at all.
He's got a ton of firsthand experience reporting from, the sharp end of international news for ages.
And crucially, he was actually in Ukraine.
Yes, in the months just before the big invasion in 2022.
That must have really shaped how he sees things.
Absolutely. That personal experience is key.
Okay, so let's get into it. The big idea, the one that really stuck with me, was him saying that being in Kyiv, February 2022, it felt like a 1939 moment.
Yeah.
That's a heavy comparison. What exactly made him feel that way?
Well, what he points to is this fundamental similarity.
Okay.
You had a leader in Europe trying to actually redraw the map by force.
Right. Not negotiation, but force.
Exactly. And that directly mirrors those, expansionist ambitions that were flying around just before World War II.
A land grab, basically.
Pretty much.
They-
Forceful grab for territory.
And he makes it really vivid, doesn't he, with that personal story? Being right there in Kyiv when the invasion started, hearing the air raid sirens.
Yeah, he talks about filming from his hotel roof.
And deciding to watch the footage back in black and white.
Because it felt like something straight out of an old newsreel from 1939.
Wow. That detail really hits home.
It does. And it connects, for you listening, to the really stark choice Sciutto thinks we face now.
He draws a line directly back to the choices people made in World War II, especially around D-Day.
That's it. He keeps circling back to this core idea, freedom versus, well, the lack of freedom.
Or freedom versus tyranny, as he puts it.
Right. And he reminds you about the huge sacrifices made back then.
And how those choices basically built the relatively stable world we've had since, for the most part.
Which then leads to a pretty crucial question, doesn't it?
Which is?
If this is a kind of 1939 moment, were there warning signs earlier? Things we perhaps missed or maybe didn't take seriously enough?
And Sciutto definitely thinks there were. He points to several things leading up to the full Ukraine invasion that he sees as, red flags.
Absolutely. He uses this term, a shadow war.
Yes.
He felt Russia had been waging this against the West for years already. Things like constant cyber attacks.
And those mysterious little green men popping up in Ukraine even before 2022.
Exactly. And it goes back further still. Sciutto really flags the 2014 annexation of Crimea.
Right, and parts of eastern Ukraine, too.
He talks about being there, seeing ballots of pro-Western candidates just being burned.
A blatant move to kill the democratic process.
Yeah, a pretty clear signal of intent, you'd have to say.
It's quite chilling when he brings up those earlier examples, too. Russia's willingness to just silence people.
Like the poisoning of Viktor Yushchenko back in 2004.
After he challenged the pro-Russian candidate. Such a ruthless example.
And then, maybe even more disturbing, the Alexander Litvinenko case in London, 2006.
Poisoned with polonium, that was shocking.
After he spoke out against Putin. It just shows the extreme lengths they were allegedly willing to go to.
And Sciutto himself got caught up in the aftermath of that, didn't he?
Yeah, he mentions being advised to get tested for radiation exposure afterward.
Wow. That really brings home the seriousness for you, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Now, Sciutto also makes a really important point about how this current situation is different from the original Cold War.
Okay, how so?
This time, he argues, it's not just one major rival power we're facing. It's two.
Russia and China.
Exactly. And what's really significant there is that no limits partnership they announced.
Just weeks before the Ukraine invasion, yeah.
Sciutto stresses this wasn't just talk. We've seen, pretty solid evidence of China giving Russia significant economic support, maybe even some military help since then.
So that alliance really changes the game.
Completely changes the dynamic.
And that partnership, as Sciutto points out, immediately makes you think about Taiwan.
Uh-huh. He sees Taiwan as possibly the next big flashpoint, a really critical test of these choices we're facing globally.
Yeah, and again, he has firsthand experience there.
Yes, visiting Taiwan, seeing their military exercises, specifically preparing for a potential Chinese invasion.
That story about the Taiwanese jets scrambling.
Yeah, because Chinese planes flew into their airspace. It really shows how immediate, how real that threat feels if you live there.
Absolutely. And the key takeaway for you listening seems to be that China is watching Ukraine very, very closely.
Like a case study in real time, seeing how the world reacts, what they might be able to, get away with.
Right. But Sciutto doesn't just focus on those sort of traditional military threats, does he?
No, he broadens it out. He highlights other areas, other fronts where this competition and potential conflict is playing out.
Okay, like what?
Well, the South China Sea, for instance.
Ah, the islands.
China creating those unsinkable aircraft carriers on Spratly Islands, building landing strips, hangars, putting missiles there.
It's a clever way to project power without, a direct invasion.
Very innovative, yeah, though concerning. Then there's the underwater aspect.
Submarines.
He mentions Russia's newer subs, quieter, nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed,
Right.
and the detail about one possibly visiting Cuba not long ago.
That definitely brings back Cold War vibes. The hunt for Red October, almost.
He even makes that comparison and points out the irony of the political officer's name in the film, Putin.
Slightly unsettling parallel, that.
Isn't it? And then cyber, of course.
Hmm.
Another huge area he flags.
The sheer number of attacks.
Thousands a day, he says, citing the NSA, from Russia and China aimed at the U.S.
It's like this constant, invisible battle going on, affecting everything from infrastructure to, our data.
And we can't ignore space either. Sciutto talks about the weaponization of space heating up.
Anti-satellite weapons, lasers.
Both China and Russia testing them, yeah. And he mentions China's kidnapper satellite, that's the U.S. term, with a grappling arm.
Sounds like something out of James Bond. He mentions Moonraker, I think.
He does. It's quite surreal how sci-fi is just becoming reality.
Yeah. And drones, obviously. Their role in Ukraine has been massive. Another huge shift in warfare.
Definitely. And then finally, and maybe this is the most worrying, the nuclear situation.
What's the concern there, specifically?
Well, several things. China's growing arsenal, Russia and North Korea already having nukes, Iran getting closer.
And fewer treaties to manage it all.
Exactly. A real erosion of those international agreements. He quotes the CIA director warning we're sort of playing without a net now.
That's a stark image, playing without a net on nuclear weapons.
It really is, which underlines the precariousness for all of us.
So given all these flashpoints, all these escalating tensions across so many areas, Sciutto then looks to history, right? For lessons.
Yeah, how can history help us navigate this? He brings up that famous Winston Churchill quote about appeasement.
The one about feeding a crocodile.
Hoping it will eat him last.
Yeah.
He mentions the leader of Estonia quoting it.
Powerful. It's a strong rejection of those 1930s policies that, clearly didn't work.
No, they failed to stop a world war. And he also brings up the Cuban Missile Crisis.
As a reminder of how close we've come before.
Sobering, isn't it? Kennedy had studied that book, The Guns of August, about how World War I started almost by accident.
And he was determined not to let that happen with nuclear weapons.
Exactly. Which makes the weakening of treaties since then even more concerning.
Definitely. Sciutto then kind of shifts focus slightly, doesn't he, to the human side of all this.
Yeah, he emphasizes that for people on the front lines, like NATO troops in the Baltics,
Yeah.
this isn't just, an academic discussion.
It's real. It's existential for them.
Right. He tells that story about the NATO exercise where they had a near miss with Russian jets.
Shows how high the tensions are right there on the border. Hair trigger stuff.
But, it's not all doom and gloom. He does share a couple of moments from Ukraine that are genuinely inspiring.
Ah, yeah. Like what?
He talks about seeing these long lines of ordinary Ukrainians, teenagers, old guys, veterans, all queuing up to volunteer, to defend their country.
That says a lot about their commitment.
It really does. Their commitment to freedom, self-determination. And then there was the gift.
The flag.
A Ukrainian flag, signed by commanders on the front lines, thanking the U.S. for support, but basically saying, we're still fighting for our freedom.
A really powerful symbol of their resolve.
Yeah. resilience and resolve.
So ultimately, Sciutto brings it back to that fundamental difference, doesn't he?
He does. This contest, at its heart, is between societies that value freedom and those that, well, don't.
And he argues that that belief in liberty, that's actually a key strength, a crucial advantage.
Which loops us right back around, really, to that first question Jim Sciutto asked.
What kind of world do you want to live in?
Exactly. Because the choices being made right now by leaders everywhere, they have a direct, profound impact on the future you get.
Yeah.
And your kids get.
So as you think about all this, all these different fronts we've touched on, war, cyber, space, everything, what do you think is the most critical area? Where do we really need to focus to make sure we get a future that is defined by freedom and security?
It's a massive web of challenges, isn't it?
It really is. And understanding all these different parts, how they connect, that feels absolutely crucial as we try to find a way forward.
Definitely. And look, this deep dive, we've covered a lot, but it's really just scratching the surface of these huge issues.
Just the start, yeah.
So we'd really encourage you to keep exploring, read more, discuss it, think critically.
Because the choices we all make, collectively, they're going to shape the world for, well, for decades.